Welcome to another episode of From the Shed End podcast. It's been a while. This is episode 68. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, first of all. I'm sure everyone gets sick of me saying that. And you'll see that Theo isn't here. He's away on his travels still, as I said he would be. But we are joined by a very, very special guest. Do you want to just introduce yourself and let the listeners know as well your own channel? I know you've got your own podcast channel and YouTube channel as well that's doing really well.
No, thanks for having me, mate. Appreciate it. Obviously, I'm Charlie. Obviously a massive Chelsea fan. Got a podcast with one of my mates, George, and I've also got a YouTube channel as well called the Blues Brothers, where we kind of just do a bit of everything, really. Match previews, match reviews, transfer news, whatever. Basically, all Chelsea news is covered on there. So yeah, if you want to go and check that out and subscribe to my channel as well, then yeah, please do so.
Yeah, cheers, Charlie. Thanks for joining us as well. But it's been a while, as I said, we haven't done a podcast episode for a while. And strangely, as I was sort of getting set up, I thought it was only last week that Thomas Tuchel was actually still in charge at Chelsea.
Mad. So quick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a weird week. So I want to take it all the way back because I think it's only right we do that for the podcast. For anyone who's a watcher of the YouTube, you'll know I've definitely voiced my opinions about Thomas Tuchel, and we've mentioned around the sacking already. But for the audio podcast listeners, just what was your thoughts about Thomas Tuchel as Chelsea manager, first of all? I mean, he had 100 games at Chelsea, a good milestone to have. Unfortunately, didn't get to see out another 50 as he put it in one of his press conferences. But what was your thoughts about Thomas Tuchel and his time at Chelsea? Because I've got my own opinions, and I'm sure Theo is. But what's yours?
I think it's done a phenomenal job. All things considered, coming in a difficult period in January when he replaced obviously Frank Lampard, and within 5 months delivers the Champions League with the same set of players that didn't look like doing anything. If we're being perfectly honest, I think we were 9th or 10th on the table when he took over. And to come in and to transform it, obviously comes in, switches to a three at the back, or back five. We've had success with that under Antonio Conte, obviously different players though, but he's come in, and I don't think it should be understated how huge that impact is to take a team that is struggling, playing awful football, 9th in the table in January, to in May winning the Champions League, and not only winning the Champions League, but the teams that we beat along the way, and the fact that I think we conceded 4 goals in the whole tournament. I think that's the best defensive record in the Champions League history. When under Lampard, we were shipping goals left, right, and centre with the same players. I think he used his experience, bringing the likes of Rudiger back in from the cold. I hadn't really seen him very much. Bringing Jorginho back as well. Sort of key players that under Lampard for whatever reasons weren't featuring. To then bring those back in, I think that's kind of where Tuchel, using his experience, his know-how within the game, to kind of get senior pros on side. And the way that he developed the likes of Rudiger, how Thiago Silva kicked on even more under him as well. Reece James developing, Ben Chilwell developing, etc., and whatnot. Like, it's that job was phenomenal. I think he has done really well. Reaching 6 of the 7 available finals. I mean, we're talking 2 penalties kicks away from having another 2 trophies in the cabinet, and you're looking at things very differently, and perhaps that buys him a little bit more time. But I think his time has been plagued by things that no football manager should have to be talking about, war in Ukraine, sanctions for the club, which is nothing to do with him. But I think the guys above him, I think they're a little bit spineless, to be perfectly honest. Not apart from Petr Cech, no one coming out and saying anything. Obviously we had communications from Roman through statements through his people and whatnot. Fine, we know that Roman doesn't speak very much publicly anyway. We kind of expect that. But for Chairman Bruce Buck to just be silent on this, nothing on the Super League from Buck, and then nothing on the sanctions from Bruce Buck as well. They almost fed him to the wolves, really. And he's trying to focus on the football, and you get every press conference is not about football. It's about Ukraine, which is nothing to do with him. So I think he had a tough hand there. I thought he handled himself perfectly. He speaks very well. He's an intelligent guy. He's an honest guy. But ultimately, that can be a little bit distracting. But at the end of the day, the results on the pitch, they've not been good. They haven't been good for a while. It's not just the start of this season. The back end of last season was really poor as well.
Pre-season as well.
Pre-season terrible. You could almost argue that really since Christmas, as in last Christmas, where we obviously went on a poor Christmas period, we haven't really played very well at all since Christmas. Look, there's a handful of games where we played well, but generally speaking, consistently haven't played well since Christmas. And that's, look, there's obviously context to that with everything that's going on outside the club. But when you're looking at just results, and football at the end of the day is a results-based business, people don't like to apply context to things. But yeah, the results haven't been great. I mean, I think he's done a great job. I do, you know, obviously winning us a Club World Cup, winning a Super Cup, you know, completing the set for the club. But when you look at, you know, was he building a team for the future? I love him, but I'm not sure. He's one of those managers that, you know, you come in to win now. Chelsea's never gone with a quote unquote project manager. Look at the names of the managers we've employed: Mourinho, Kante.
Instant success.
Like, you're looking at instant success. Come in, have an instant impact, win a load of trophies, 2-3 seasons tops, and then you move on. You know, we've never had a project manager. And if you look back at where Tuchel's been at his previous clubs, he's never been someone that stays at a club for more than 2 to 3 years either. So you're asking Tuchel to go through something that he's not really done as a manager. And I can quite easily see how the visions didn't align and how there were fallings out, particularly when you've got to deal with people that very successful business people, but no disrespect to them, they don't know anything about football. These guys are completely new to the sport. And when there's no structure above him, there's no surprise that the best work he did was when he first came in with that structure of Mourinho and Cech above him. And he didn't really have much to say, not much communication with Roman, you know, and Mourinho and Cech kind of just do what they do. And Tuchel has a bit of an input, but he can very much focus on the coaching.
Football.
Whereas this summer, you know, new owners come in, he's cleared out the hierarchy above him. Fine. You know, I get it. New guys are going to come in and they're going to want their own people in. That's cool. I haven't got a problem with that. But my problem is that if you're going to do that, make sure you've got some people lined up to come in.
That's what surprised me. That surprised me a lot.
But in slight defense of them, though, I think Bowley wanted to keep Cech. But I think, you know,
he wanted to leave.
Yeah, I think you know that when a new guy comes in, you're kind of surplus to requirements. You know that you're going to be eventually replaced. So he took his opportunity to go. But yeah, I'm surprised that perhaps there wasn't people lined up before clearing out that hierarchy. Because by clearing that hierarchy out, Bowley was effectively acting as sporting director. And he was asking a lot of Thomas Tuchel to, like, you know, regular meetings, thoughts on transfers, this and that, you know, much more active role than any manager would normally have. And I think you could tell he was looking strained. It was taking its toll on him. You know, the pre-season, it was awful. And I know that the Bowley didn't plan that tour. It was obviously the previous administration that planned the tour. But at the end of the day, you know, signs were there in pre-season that this was taking a toll on him, having all this extra responsibility. And I think it was quite telling when the window closed that, no, he was just relieved. He was just like, I'm so glad I can just concentrate on football again. I'm not making excuses for why I've played so badly this season, but it's quite clear. It's quite clear that he hasn't been able to 100% focus on the football, on improving the side. And you can tell from our performances that perhaps his messages weren't getting across to the players, or they had noticed that he wasn't 100% on kind of improving the team or whatever, and it kind of came to a head. So I think he's done a phenomenal job. One of the best managers we've had. Sort of for me, I think the closest kind of guy we've had to Mourinho since him. But ultimately, like, with him going, was I surprised? No, but the one thing that did surprise me was kind of the timing of it. For me, it was either get rid of this guy before the window even opened, like, just get rid of him before pre-season and whatnot. Or, like, get to the World Cup or get to the international break and then reassess there. I mean, if he's not your guy, he's not your guy. But I just think why sort of spend £200 to £300 million on players that have got heavy input from him. I'm not, look, don't get me wrong, Graham Potter is not going to be annoyed that he's got to work with
He's inherited some good players.
Like Torreira, who he knows, and like Aubameyang's Sterling. And he's not going to be annoyed about that. Of course he's not, but
he just hasn't had his say, has he? He hasn't had his input into that. And
so I wasn't surprised at the sacking, mate, but I was more surprised at kind of the timing around it, just because for me, if you're going to get rid of someone, get rid of them before the season starts, or at least get to kind of an international break or the World Cup. I don't think that things weren't great on the pitch at all. And yeah, for sure, they could have got a bit worse. And if you're going to what's the point in waiting 2 weeks? If you're going to get rid of him, just get rid of him. But I was disappointed, but ultimately, I'm not really surprised.
No, I'm definitely with you 100%. You know, you made some really good points. I think you look at when Thomas Tuchel took the job, that first game, Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think it was 0-0. It was a brilliant game, as much as there was no goals, because if you remember how we were playing under Frank Lampard, and we were crying out for just something to change, and we got to see that. I remember there was a promo video of Tuchel's first training session, a very small clip from on the Fifth Stand app, and you could just notice the difference in the training. We didn't get to see it under Lampard, but you could tell that there was something different about Tuchel coming in, doing really well. And just over the couple of months, you just got to see this energy and belief, desire from Tuchel just sucked out of him. Obviously he's had off-field, his marriage is broken down as well. COVID, he had to deal with that as well. There were so many things that were just against him. Again, I think Wolves, maybe at Molineux, I think we had 3 outfield players and 2 subs on the bench, and it was just.
I went to that game. It was honestly, we're terrible. We had about 3 keepers on the bench just to fill it.
I couldn't believe, and everyone else's games at the time were getting postponed, if you remember, and it was just our games were never postponed. There's not an excuse to say that we shouldn't have. It's not an excuse, because we still got 11 quality players on the pitch. We should still be able to do a job, but it does hamper your options off the bench as well. I just think it was more the back end, like you said, after Christmas. I think there was a massive congestion. If you remember, last December, we were playing almost a game every 3 days, I think, or something silly. Mendy, African Cup of Nations as well. Kepa actually came in and done really well. I think there was a game, the FA Cup, a couple of the FA Cup games, he done really well. But it was just after Christmas, and then obviously it was just, you could just tell, I think from pre-season, this season starting, you could tell that something wasn't right. The sanctions didn't help in terms of strategy, in terms of recruitment, but I just think in terms of the connection between Todd Boehly and Thomas Tuchel just didn't align, and you could see that. And I think you hit one of the nails on the head in terms of, when any change in any, it doesn't have to be football, just any of the business. If a new owner comes in, he's definitely got a vision. He's got something that he wants to do, and he's normally get rid of the old hierarchy, bring in your own. I agree with you. I was very shocked when Marina Granovskaya left and there was no real replacement. Bruce Buck the same as well. There was no real urgency to get anyone in, and maybe looking back, that was Todd Boehly's idea. I'll take this summer transfer window on my shoulders and just try and carry it through to when the window shuts. And even the director of football now, that's suddenly picked up again, and we're talking about PSG and this person, RB Salzburg's director of football at the moment. I think we're looking at loads of different options. I agree with you. I wasn't shocked. And again, if you've been listening or watching the YouTube videos, you'll know that I've always been saying time is ticking for Thomas Tuchel. The performances haven't been good. Players have been played out of position for obvious reasons, especially before we had Wesley Fofana. We saw Reece James playing right centre back, and I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek was right wing back at times as well. It worked. I think it worked really well. It was almost a hybrid right wing back. It worked, but it's not ideal. But I think for me, it was, and it's easy to say this now, but after the Zagreb game in Croatia, you could just tell the players are down tools. There was a disconnect between Tuchel and the players.
He just sat on the, like, you sort of associate Tuchel with being out in his technical area, like shouting instructions and that. He's like barely sits down in the games.
Yeah,
it's towards the end of his reign. Like literally,
there's nothing from him.
He spent the whole game just sat in the dugout.
Yeah,
nothing from him at all. Just chatting to his assistant every so often, just nothing. And you can tell then, like, having seen what he has been like compared to what he was like at the end, you knew that the end was near, and there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we were ever led on to believe.
Yeah, I do think it's a shame, because I think he definitely, like you said, he's probably been arguably our best manager since Jose Mourinho. Very successful in 100 games to win the trophies that he did, the elusive Club World Cup as well, that we've all been wanting to see as Chelsea fans. We were unfortunate under Rafa Benitez, I think, the first attempt at trying to win that. Yeah, I mean, he's still got, he's got years ahead of him. I think one of the things that, and I think you read it as well on one of the tweets, was when he released his statement, and he almost said, he's so, you could tell that the passion was still there for him. I think it's just, as you said, a massive disconnect between owner and manager. But it was just hard to read, because you don't really get managers that close and passionate and, you know, take the club in as much. You know, they normally just take their compensation package and they move on to another job and, you know, wash their hands of the club. But I don't think that is the case with Thomas Tuchel. I think he does generally have a lot of love for the club, which is a shame for him. You know, it's a shame how it ended, but to have that on your CV for 100 games and those trophies, and, you know, the way we started the season, the facts, you know, we had to, all, like you mentioned, all those things that were happening in between the season as well. I think it's you know, if anything, it's just shows how good of a manager he is, that he can cope under those pressures. You know, not many managers could do that. So it is a shame. I agree. Very quickly, I've got to ask you this. I mean, I have the assumption that Todd Boehly was always looking at Graham Potter before, you know, for months. I think I look at some of the signings. I think, were they Thomas Tuchel signings? Maybe Aubameyang, of course, was a Thomas Tuchel signing. You know, he's you know, you mentioned Aubameyang to Thomas Tuchel, and his eyes light up. So you can tell that was a signing from Thomas Tuchel. But you look at Marc Cucurella, you look at Raheem Sterling. Were they Thomas Tuchel signings, or were they Todd Boehly with the co-sign of, you're going to work with these players, Thomas Tuchel, whether you like it or not? These are the players we're bringing in. I feel that Graham Potter, I mean, I think we sacked Thomas Tuchel very early Wednesday morning, I think it was. Yeah. And within the afternoon, you know, Brighton had already come out.
Yeah, within 24 hours, mate. It was, he was in place as a new manager. It was done.
I mean, maybe Brighton just didn't want to stand in his way, which could easily be the case. But you just look at how quick that was done. Brighton said, "Yeah, no problem. We'll take the 20 million or whatever it was we need to pay." And, you know, there was a meeting set up Wednesday evening with Graham Potter, and he was in place. You know, he was announced, I think, Thursday. So do you feel that? Well, it's two questions, but do you feel that was the case, that some of these signings, potentially just Todd Boehly thinking ahead, thinking if we do sack Thomas Tuchel, or Thomas Tuchel walks, or whatever the case is, that at least we've got proven Premier League players that, you know, Graham Potter might be able to work with until the summer window opens?
I think, as far back as pre-season, there was like they were kind of thinking about it, replacing Tuchel. As far back as pre-season, you could, like, they didn't take kindly to the comments, particularly after the Arsenal game, about the same. It's like the same players. So what are you expecting to change? Like, I don't think they took too kindly to those comments. I mean, sometimes you're like, being so honest can also work against you. And I think perhaps in that instance, it did, even though I respect that he comes out and says how it is. I think the owners looked at that and they weren't best pleased with that. But yeah, so as far back as pre-season, they were thinking about possibly replacing him. So this isn't something that's just like appeared out of nowhere. You don't sack someone on a Wednesday morning and then think, "Oh shit, who should we try and get in now?
Let's go and get Potter."
Yeah, you're already in talks with these guys beforehand. They would have known that, like, they were going to sack Tuchel. They would have known that last week, or at least a week before. They haven't just made this decision. This is a decision that's been weeks, maybe months in the making, thinking about it, talking about it. Yeah. So yeah, look, that's how football works. We know that's how football works. You know, it's cutthroat. You know, one day the guy's in the job, and you think you're going to be there for a while, and your owners are chatting to someone new to replace you to make sure it's all sorted when you get sacked off. So, I mean, look, I'm under no illusions that was definitely the case. Graham Potter, for me, the signings, I've been screaming for so long for Chelsea's recruitment strategy to change in terms of, like, signing players from within the Premier League, because under Roman, we always went for big names across Europe. It was always big names. It was never guys with Premier League experience. It was never sort of kind of taking a punt on players that might work out. Like, for example, like Chelsea would never do a Thiago Jota signing like Liverpool did. Like under Roman, that just wasn't a thing. But now I look at it under Boehly and I think, do you know what? Like, whatever people think of him, I think he's had a really good impression in the window. Like, he's backed, he's invested in the squad. Look, you can argue he had to do it. Of course, we had to replace players, aging players. You know, there's a quite a big misbalance in certain areas of the squad. Some areas are really stocked, others are massively understocked. But I think he's done well. But you look at the signings and you think these are signings that any manager can work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Personally, I think if you're a good manager, you're going to love the opportunity to work with one of the best upcoming defenders in Fofana, one of the best defenders in Europe in Koulibaly, Raheem Sterling in his prime at 27 years of age. Aubameyang, okay, maybe not as much, but you still think, you know,
he's got goals in him.
Career, he's got pedigree. You're like, this is not just kind of like a sort of a has-been. He's still got a bit about him. So you look at it, obviously he knows Cucurella very well. He brought him over to England in the first place. He knows him well. That's obviously going to be a big plus. So, I mean, it's hard to tell whether the signings were made in mind with Graham Potter taking over. Do we want to make signings that, you know, Premier League experience that sort of most managers can work with? It's hard to tell, but for sure, like definitely they were speaking to Potter beforehand, because to be honest, there's no way that Todd Boehly even knew who Graham Potter was, a few months ago or whatever it was. But I mean, yeah, look, for sure, I think that has happened, and that does happen. We know it happens, and it's giving Potter an opportunity to work with a squad of players that still needs a lot of investment, in my opinion. There'll be money to spend in January. He'll want to do his own thing. He's brought his own recruitment guy in from Brighton that's helped unearth the likes of like Basuma in the past, the Caicedo that's there now. You know, Brighton buy very well as well. So it's interesting that, I mean, the backing that Potter's already been given in terms of 5-year contracts. When do you ever see a Chelsea manager get given a 5? I know contracts don't mean anything, but Tuchel initial 18-month contract. But like to give him 5 years contract, to pay 20 million to get him in the first place, plus an extra 2 million for his staff, to bring his recruitment guy in, to let him have a say in the next director of football. This is backing for a Chelsea manager that we've never seen before.
Yeah, it shows as well that, you know, and I'm already talking about sacking Graham Potter, which I don't think will happen. But if we were to sack him after 2 seasons, he's still got 3 years left on that deal, so it's more money to pay out. So I think Todd Boehly, and I know when Thomas Tuchel was sacked, it kind of divided the fan base. You know, some people saying it's more reactionary again, and we're just doing the same as what Roman would do. And I don't think that's the case. I think, you know, Todd Boehly didn't have to get rid of Thomas Tuchel. He decided to get rid of Thomas Tuchel because he didn't align with the vision. And I think he's brought in Graham Potter, who will, you know, they've obviously had this conversation. This is not a 1 year, 2 year project. This is a long-term project. We see you as the man to do that. We're backing you 100%. We want you to be here for 5 years plus, you know, and I think that's the right thing to do. You know, I think it makes sense. I mean, obviously we've got to have reservation around Graham Potter, and we'll talk about the Salzburg game shortly, but I think he is potentially the only candidate, maybe bar Pochettino, that I would have wanted at the club. And Pochettino, ex-Spurs, I mean, he didn't do that well at PSG, so I was very, very reserved about that as well. And I think having Graham Potter in gives us the opportunity to almost reset the whole team, you know, reset the club, reset the team, move forward in almost in a Liverpool way, like you mentioned around, you know, having a Diogo Jota, but having those kind of signings come in and just give the manager the time. I think that's the key thing. We've got to give him the time to be able to embed what he wants to bring to this club and to the team. I think it's easy for us to all sit and say, you know, we didn't win, you know, against Salzburg, but I think there was pluses, positives to take from that game 100%. Before we get onto the Salzburg game, I want to talk about N'Golo Kante, and Jorginho, the two of them, but more so N'Golo Kante, because there was reports earlier this week that he'd refused I think it was a 2.5 year deal. Might have got that wrong, so don't quote me.
It was 2+1, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So option to extend. So I don't really see how he can turn that down based on the fact he misses half the season. And when he goes on international duty, he comes back injured. And he's definitely still a world-class player. Let's have that right, first of all. He's definitely someone that we miss when he's not in the team 100%. But do you think, I just can't see, what is he holding out for? 3 years, 4 years?
Well, I think under the previous regime, under Roman, like they were very close to agreeing a 3+1. And like for me, I love Kante. He's been phenomenal for Chelsea since he's been here. But there's no denying that he can still perform to a very good level, as we saw in the run to the Champions League final, as we've seen in certain Premier League games. But fact of the matter is that I think he's the second highest paid player at Chelsea. And as important as he is to the team, you can't be a key player if you're missing so many games. Yeah. And his injury record, particularly over the last 2 seasons, like the guy can barely play 2 games in a row now without getting injured. So for me, if he's going to stay, it's like he's not going to be able to have it on the terms that he wants, because his injury record and the amount of games that he's missing means that he's not really in the driving seat for these negotiations. He's going to, for me, I'd like Kante. I've got no problem with Kante staying, but it's got to be on the proviso that he reduces his wages drastically, and we're not going to be offering him a 3-year deal with an option for a fourth, because someone that's 31 with his injury record, you've potentially got him on the books till he's 35 on big money, and you're going to, and we've seen this in the past, players on big money in their late 30s, and you can't get rid of them. So for me, I'm happy for him to stay, but for me, it's a 2+1 deal, or even a 1+1, and reduce the money and try and improve your injury record, because he's not in a position now to be demanding big money still and wanting a relatively long-term contract for that age.
Yeah, because I think under Roman Abramovich, if you hit 30, it was normally it
was always just a 1 year rolling,
1 year with the option to extend for a year. If you think back to, I think, isn't that one of the reasons why Frank Lampard left as well? I can't remember.
It was mad. It used to be like John Terry. Once he hit 30, these were constant, just 1 year rolling deals. It was mad.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you 100%. I think Kante is definitely out of the two. I think you'd expect Jorginho or Kante to leave in the summer. I think the two won't be here because there hasn't been any contract talks that I'm aware of with Jorginho, unless it's just been, done behind closed doors. But you would expect one of the two to go. You look at the players that we've been linked with over the last transfer window. You'd expect a midfielder to come in the next summer window, at least maybe in January, if at a push, if we can. But I agree with you. I think it's such a weird thing from Kante. He doesn't seem like the type of player that would, cause a fuss or do an Antonio Rudiger and a Christensen and try and, haggle his way through a contract. He was all, everyone's got to look after themselves and be selfish, of course. But you just think, based on his injury records, does he need to give up his international career? Does he need to stop playing for France to try and keep himself fit and maybe get that additional year out of him and just keep himself fit a bit more? The role that he plays at the club, in that midfield, you're always going to pick up injuries because of the role that is expected of him to play and the manner that he has to play, the intensity of the game as well. But I love him as a player. He's definitely been, like I said, we miss him when we don't have him in the squad. But I just can't see the rationale behind having a player that's in the treatment room more than he is on the pitch. On a big deal like that. And like you said, Todd Bowley's had to, pay off the likes of Ross Barkley and those sort of players have had to just be paid up. I think he had 2 or 3 years left on his deal, and had to be paid off to get off the books. And we don't want to be in that position again. And I don't think the new owners will. I think they won't back down. They'd rather spend that money on bringing a player in and allowing Kante to leave on a free.
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't completely rule out both of them leaving. I've seen things. I think it might have been in the Athletic possibly about Kante wanting a new challenge and the fact that he doesn't feel he's got as many close relationships within the squad as he has done in the past. I wouldn't be out of the two. Kante is definitely nailed on to more likely to stay than Jorginho is. I think it's almost certain that Jorginho is going to be moving on in the summer. I think that's kind of common knowledge. Unless there's kind of a remarkable U-turn. But I wouldn't rule out both of them leaving either. I wouldn't be surprised at Kante's age if it's a sort of play you could see him going to PSG, something like that.
Nice easy.
Go back to France, play for a bit. But out of the two, I'd rather keep Kante. But for me, as I said, on different terms, and he needs to be managed better as well. Because as a manager, because he can be so good, you want to play him all the time. But Kante is not what he was a few years ago. I know it's so tempting to just chuck him in, and as fans like, why are we playing Kante? But you look back last season and whatnot, you're looking at games at home against lower level teams, no disrespect to them, games that we obviously drop points in. But when you're playing against a Burnley at home, you don't need to play Kante and Jorginho.
Just one of the two.
Yeah, it's not necessary. So I think Kante, if he's going to stay, needs to be managed better. Doesn't need to be played every week. Just use him for the big games. But out of the two, he's more likely to stay. But I wouldn't rule out both of them leaving, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's the way forward. And this is why I think, going back to the Graham Potter part, I think this is why he's been brought in, because I think he potentially wouldn't mind losing both of them, because he potentially will have key players that he wants to bring in, once we get director of football, I can see us really trying to hit the transfer window hard. I think in the summer, I know we've done that this window, 250 odd million, but I think we're going to try and do that in the next summer as well. And you know, there are some really good midfielders out there. You know, obviously not Zakaria, who can't get a game at the moment, but there are some good midfielders out there that could easily replace them. And I think, you know, from what Todd Bowley's been trying to do, he's trying to bring in youth players, you know, younger players that he can keep at the club for, you know, a duration of time and build from that way, as opposed to bringing in, you know, albeit Thiago Silva's been amazing, but rather than not bringing in someone who's at the end of their career, bringing in a youngster who's got the potential and the capability to get a lot better as well. So I agree with you. I wouldn't be annoyed to see both of them leave, because they've both been good players at times for us as well. But it is what it is. I think, you know, I don't think players have the option to hold the owner or the club at ransom anymore.
Yeah.
Almost what Christensen did to an extent, maybe Rudiger, if we were going to do, you know, Marcus, you know, those players that almost, you know, they've come to the end and they feel that they have the power. I don't think Todd Bowley cares. I'll really be honest. I don't think he cares about, you know, contracts and you know, players trying to get as much as they want from a selfish point of view. If he doesn't agree with what is on the table, he just won't allow the contract to be signed off. So, and I like that as well. I like that 100%. But let's talk about our Champions League game. Let's talk about our Champions League campaign, actually, because Dinamo Zagreb was poor.
Yeah.
RB Salzburg was a better performance, but still poor in spells. We've got 2 back-to-back games of AC Milan, which is not going to be easy. Let's talk about Salzburg. What was your thoughts on the performance? Let's talk about the lineup, because I think it was a very, I mean, Graham Potter was always going to have to change things slightly. But what was your thoughts on the lineup initially?
A little bit confused initially, trying to work out what sort of system it was like. Initially I thought it was a 4, and I was like, nah, there's no way he's playing Aspie alongside Thiago Silva in a centre-back pairing. But like, if you look at how Graham Potter sets up in Brighton, it's very much like a back 3, but then the quote-unquote wing backs are like almost playing as like wingers in the final third. And then you see like the 2 kind of central midfield players, when those wing backs are high up the pitch, will then drop in and defend. But you know, like, the lineup itself very much reminded me of Tuchel's first game.
Yeah,
went with experience. So he went with Azpilicueta. He obviously, you know, he went with Cucurella, someone he knows. He obviously goes with experience and Aubameyang rather than Broja. He goes with, you know, Sterling. Mount plays as well. You know, this, like, he's gone with kind of what he knows, and he's gone with experience, like Thomas Tuchel very much did when he went, you know, when he played at the 5 at the back. You know, he reverted back to Giroud. He brought Jorginho back, and he brought Rudiger in. Yeah. Like, you know, I think managers, when they come in, and I don't agree with this. Necessarily the kind of the trail of thought that, oh, it's your first game, you've got to play your captain. Like, for me, that I just don't think that's necessary. But I can understand why Potter kind of maybe in his first game, kind of his first game in the Champions League, his first game as a manager of Chelsea, of a big football club, like, he probably wants to try and keep these kind of senior players on side from the off, which is perhaps why he's played Aspie. But in terms of the lineup, you know, not too many complaints of it. You know, I'm pleased to see Mason Mount deployed deeper. I think he can be far more effective there than he is in a little bit than he is closer to the goal. Kovacic, obviously a no-brainer. Jorginho in that 6, and then obviously Sterling, James, and then Aubameyang with Havertz kind of floating off him. So realistically, mate, wouldn't have done too much differently. Obviously, I wouldn't have played Azpilicueta. I would have played Koulibaly or Fofana. But other than that, like, I can understand why he went with the picks that he did.
Yeah, I think it was my only concern was seeing, you know, I think Azpilicueta must be 31, 32, might be 33. And Thiago Silva, I think yesterday turned 38. So you've got 2 players who aren't naturally their fast, you know, they're not known for their speed anymore at that point. So I agree with you. I think he went for the safer option. You know, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, because if he plays Wesley Fofana and he has a stinker of a game, you know, everyone would have been crying out for Azpilicueta to have been in that team. So I don't think he could have won Graham Potter in that aspect. But I think overall, I was impressed with the lineup. I was impressed with how we started the game, the intensity, the drive. I thought Raheem Sterling playing on that sort of, as you said, like almost a left wing back winger sort of hybrids at one point, hogging the touchline, a lot of space down the left side. Mason Mount, Reece James as well.
Basically, what Trossard, but essentially the Trossard role, essentially like what Potter has been doing with Trossard and Solly March. Yeah, so like technically Sterling is, I suppose, playing as a wing back, but he's basically playing as a left winger, and kind of midfield just drops in to defend that space, basically.
Yeah, and I think it worked. I think it worked against I can't remember the defender on the left side, but it worked on the right side. But it worked for Sterling. And
Sterling said after the game that he was really happy that he was playing wider. Like for me, that was one thing under Tuchel. I never understood why he was playing Sterling through the middle the whole time, because Sterling, all right, he did it a few times at City, but
he's known
his City
to be
career,
there,
he's playing as a winger. So there's no surprise that him playing as a winger. And you see with his goal, like when he cuts in and he puts it in the corner. How many times have we seen him do that for City? That's virtually what all his goals have been like for City. So I didn't understand why Tuchel played him down the middle. So if Potter's going to play him in that position, I think it's perfect for him.
Yeah, it'll work. I think this is why I was very positive, albeit that we didn't win the game. I think the reasons that, you can't expect miracles from a team that's obviously low in confidence and, a change in manager. You can't expect miracles. I did expect us to win 100% because I thought, you need points. You've got 2 back-to-back AC Milan games that are going to be really difficult, even at Stamford Bridge. So you need to go into that game. I called it a must-win game, because of what we've got coming up. But I think it worked. I thought I was happy. I think once that team hopefully clicks, you've got to think about Aubameyang, who's, had a whirlwind of, 14 days, the unfortunate robbery in his house, comes to Chelsea. He's back with Tuchel. Tuchel sacked. He's even come out and said, he doesn't feel like he's fully fit. He's not mentally there 100% as well.
That's why I don't understand. That's one thing I don't get is why Tuchel chucked him in straight away to start that Zagreb game.
It was
you can tell that he's playing within himself like that. Obviously, he's got that fractured jaw, playing with a mask. You can tell he's not going in, but he's not giving 100% to everything. He's still holding a little bit back, which makes me think, well, why did Tuchel start him against Zagreb, and then why has he started in this game against Salzburg? Surely. You could have either played Havertz up there, or, in my opinion, you should just chucked Brozier up there. And
he's done really well when he came on.
Brozier looks good when he came on. I have to say, I thought Aubameyang was poor, but it's not all his own doing. But he was dreadful. Like you just want him in the area, but he was never in the box. He just didn't really offer anything. And I'm not saying like that's all like his fault. He's obviously not 100% fit, so he probably shouldn't be starting these games. But yeah, I think he offered absolutely nothing.
I think it's more of a mentality thing as well. I think he's, I can only imagine what it must be like to go through that trauma, and then to almost just be right. You've been dealt those cards, but now here's a new set of things you've got to deal with, and he probably hasn't processed what's happened to him in Spain. So I think it's more a mentality thing, as more and obviously fitness levels. I think he was playing for Barcelona, so it can't really be that much of a fitness thing. I know he played in the sort of, it was like a charity game, I think, against Man City, and scored for Barcelona just before his move. So I think I'm impressed with the squad. I was impressed with what I got to see. I know there wasn't much change from what Thomas Tuchel was implementing anyway, but just in terms of what Graham Potter's trying to do, you can see that there's thought process behind it, and I think that was the key thing. I thought Salzburg were slightly lucky. I said on the match preview that we needed to be very mindful of them. They're top of the Austrian Bundesliga. They've won 7 out of 8 games domestically as well. I think they'd scored 21 goals, I think, in their domestic league already this season. So they're not, very much like Dinamo Zagreb, not to be underestimated. And I thought goal that they scored was avoidable. And you can break it down in 3 stages.
It's 3 errors. Like at the end of the day, you can't make 3 errors in a passage of play and expect not to concede a goal. Like one thing I don't understand is why do we never make tactical fouls? Like everyone does it against us, but we never do it. Like we saw it against Southampton. Jorginho could have brought his man down on just inside, just like the halfway line, take the booking, free kick, regroup. Could have done the same again there. Then you see Thiago Silva gets dragged out wide, where he doesn't really like.
He doesn't need to go to ground as well. Why is he going to ground?
He makes a bit. Look, I thought Silva had a great game, and we can't be too critical of him. But in this instance, like he's made a hash of the tackle where he should do better. And Azpilicueta is just asleep at the back stick. He knows that guy's there, and he's just nowhere near him. So you can't make 3 mistakes in a passage of play and be surprised that they've scored a goal. So whilst there were a lot of positives, and I really liked that how Sterling and James were so high up the pitch, and it was really refreshing to see us actually have quite a lot of options in the attacking third, like a lot of bodies in there. But on the flip side, it does, if you get caught out, you're left very exposed. There was a couple of times where, I think one time where we saw Kepa rushing out to sort of
Silva,
rushing out to head a ball away, almost, well, not quite at the halfway line, but that's why I think a sweeper keeper is going to be very important under Potter if he continues playing like this, which is why I think Kepa's got much more of a shout of being number one than Mendy does, because Mendy just hasn't got that in his game, or that area of his game is his weakest part. But you are like, I liked a lot of it, but you're also very exposed. If you get caught out, like you can, like they could almost be through on goal.
It happened against Zagreb. That's how Zagreb got their goal because of our high line. I think it was for
Fofana missed the header, and then Fofana got outpaced by Orsic. Yeah, so you got to be careful. There's definitely pros and there's cons, and we will get more used to this system and we will play better. But yeah, I mean, you look at it and you sort of think, if we're going to play like that, where does Ben Chilwell fit in? Because that one for me seems like that's a shoe-in for Sterling. And then could Chilwell maybe rotate with Cucurella as left of a three? Who knows? But yeah, I mean, look, there's options there for Potter, and there were big pluses. I say the Sterling and James high at the pitch for me was a real plus. Just options in the final third, and you could see like slightly different patterns of play and like positive signs there. But it's unrealistic to expect overnight change, and then the same frailties there. Individual mistakes, not taking advantage of a game when you're dominating, and just not killing teams off, and kind of lots of possession. But I don't want to call it pointless. I don't want to call it pointless possession, but it's like possession, but we're doing nothing with it. Like it's all very well. We had lots of the ball, but what did we actually do with it? Other than the goal, I think we had one chance where Mount had that kind of sliced shot, which he probably should have done a bit better with.
Broja had one in the second half.
One
as well,
one towards the end where he skied it.
That was
You're looking at that for a game you've basically dominated. You've had one, other than your goal, you've had one chance. So it's the same issues that are there, but there were promising signs for sure.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that hopefully over time changes. I think like I said, I think it's frustrating. I think this season, and I suppose we may as well get onto this now in terms of expectations for Graham Potter this season. But I think for me, and I said it on the match review that I did yesterday, I have written this season off in terms of, trying to win the Champions League or trying to win, we're miles away from trying to win the Premier League or the Champions League. I think this season, I think this season now is about Graham Potter getting the best out of this team, understanding what his best 11 is, which I think Thomas Tuchel failed to do. I don't think he had a consistent 11. You look at a Man City, you can almost name Man City's, maybe they're a bad example, but Liverpool, 100%, you could name Liverpool's best 11, and we never really had that. We never had a consistent 11, a consistent attacking front three or a front two. We never had that. So I think this season, for me now, Graham Potter's got to get that nailed down. He's got to get these players playing as a team. The cohesion has to be joined up, because if it's not, it's pointless sacking Thomas Tuchel. You've sacked a world-class, world-class manager and brought in someone who is a brilliant manager but doesn't have that level of, experience, playing in the Champions League or dealing with massive players in terms of, like you just mentioned, Patrick Aubameyang's and, just a high-profile player. He hasn't really had that. So I want it to work. I want it to be that the project needs to be, seen from start to end for Potter. I think the 5 years. But I suppose I'll ask you, what's the expectations for you now as a Chelsea fan? What do you think this season realistically is the objectives realistically?
I mean, I think we as fans, or certainly for me, kind of, I've only ever grown up with Chelsea winning stuff. It's like been very spoiled, because all we did under Roman was win trophies. Like, I don't think we didn't go consecutive seasons without winning a trophy. There was always the longest gap without winning a trophy was like one season. So I think we've got to slightly readjust our expectations and kind of realize where we are. I know that as fans, it's hard to do that because you get so emotive, like, you feel you should be doing better. But I think we've got to really strip it back and just be like, look, we're not as good as we think we are. We're nowhere near as good as we have been in the past. Like, we're going through a transitional period. There's going to be, don't get me wrong, there's going to be more pain to come this season. Things could get worse before they get better. Like, and that's just the way it is. And we have to prepare ourselves for that and realize that, you don't start a project and then, after sort of a couple of weeks, like a few matches, think, nah, this is not working. You've got to stick with it. Like, you've got to give it time. This is going to take time. It's going to take time for Potter to implement things. It's going to take time for him to get used to how Chelsea operates. It's going to take time to get his ideas across, bring players in that he wants to bring in, what direction we're going to go in. So for me, I think season expectations, I don't really have too many, but I think I know it's been reported that if we were to miss out on the top 4, that hasn't got any impact on Potter's future. I think that is the right thing. But what it does have an impact on is the ability to attract certain players. Because there are certain, there's a certain, if you go shopping in a certain category of player,
well, the Champions
there's
League,
certain players, they're not going to join a Europa League club, despite what Chelsea have got as a history.
Yeah. That's if you get the Europa League.
Well, there's a problem there. So, I mean, look, for me, I think top 4 has got to be, it sounds ridiculous saying it, but top 4 has got to be the minimum. And I think that's very doable. But I also look at the league and I think, apart from Manchester City, like, everything else is quite up for grabs because, Liverpool aren't playing well. Okay, Arsenal are playing well at the moment, but, they'll have a period
they'll
where
drop
they
off. Yeah.
United seem to be getting a bit of a head of steam under Ten Hag at the moment, but you look at them and you think, well, they could be there or thereabouts in the top 4, but you probably think there's teams better than them. And then there's also Spurs as well, who obviously are playing well and picking up results under Kante, but not playing well. So you look at it and you think City probably is shooing for the title, but the rest of the places as it stands right now, they're all up for grabs. I'm not saying by any means we're going to come second in the league, but you only have to go on a bit of a run and you could quite easily find yourself like in second place. But for me, I think top 4 has got to be the priority. A decent run in the Champions League. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but you'd like to think like a quarter final at least or something like that. And then maybe a domestic cup. I mean, you think League Cup would be the easiest one to get, but unfortunately we've got City away in the 3rd round, so we could be out. But yeah, for me, mate, it's got to be top 4, and then I just think a decent run in the Champions League. If we can get a domestic cup, great, but I'm not really expecting too much from this season. I think it's just about Potter getting his feet under the table, getting his ideas across, seeing progression as a team in terms of how we're playing and how cohesive we are, seeing patterns of play, clear patterns of play, and identity as well. I think those would be big pluses, and we just have to strip the expectations right back, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's the only thing we can do. I think that's the only thing we can do as Chelsea fans is just anything beyond top 4 for me is a bonus. Even trophies, even the FA Cup, Carabao Cup, progression in the Champions League, or albeit the Europa League if we don't we don't make it through the group stages. But this season for me isn't about winning trophies. It's about seeing the team perform as a team. And at the start of the season, I said let's close the gap on Liverpool and City, but if anything, the last 6 games has told me, and to the Champions League, we're miles away from them. We're as much as we think we're closer than we think we are to them, we're really not. And I agree with you 100%. This is our time now to reset, transitional period or whatever we want to call it, and get the team playing as well as they can. And I think that's what we've got to do, 100%.
I'd agree with it. It's as simple as that. We just got to reset everything, and we're almost, I'm not saying we're starting from scratch, but we've got to strip the expectations back and just back the manager and just go with whatever happens. There's no point us, calling for managers to be sacked when we go on our first bad run of form, because you're never going to get anywhere if you just keep replacing the manager.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. Charlie, it's been really good having you on. Just before you go, I know you did it at the very start, but just let everyone know where they can find your podcast and your YouTube channel, The Blues Brothers. Yeah,
so Blues Brothers, literally on YouTube, just type in The Blues Brothers. There, normally it does come up with like some music one. It's not that. If you just put Blues Brothers, you just put Blues Brothers Chelsea, it'll come up and you'll see it. That's obvious, and just everything's on there. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, then if you're watching it on YouTube, my handles will be on the screen, so you can drop me a follow on there if you want to. But yeah, basically just the Blues Brothers on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you can, be greatly appreciated. That's where basically all the content is.
Yeah, in fact, I'll put some links in the description to everything.
Perfect.
So save everyone time searching. Yeah. But Charlie, it's been a pleasure. We'll definitely get you back on, hopefully when Theo's stopped traveling as a jet setter and he's back in England. But we'll get everyone back on and do this again. It's been fun. But thanks for joining. This has been episode 68 of From the Shed End podcast with myself, Theo and Charlie. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back hopefully very soon with another episode.